20 minutes before the top of the hour here on Morning Live, let's talk about where we are as a country. Let's talk about our, I suppose, many social ills that South Africa seems to be plagued with at the moment, whether it be politics, corruption, unemployment, rape, murder, violent service delivery protests, the high levels of teenage pregnancy. I mean, the list is endless. We can keep on going on the problems that face us. Let's go back a little bit. In 1999, former President Nelson Mandela said these words: "This problem manifests itself in all areas of life. More often than not, it is business people who launder funds to curry favour with public servants. It is ordinary citizens who seek to buy themselves out of trouble. It is strange religious leaders who sing praises to criminals or hoard land acquired by the foul means of apartheid. All of us must work together for our redemption. Our hope for the future depends also on our resolution as a nation in dealing with the scourge of corruption." He closes his quote by saying, "Success will require an acceptance that in many respects we are a sick society." Let's talk about this. Are we a sick society? We've got in studio with us Father Smangaliso Mkachwa. He, of course, is the chair of the Moral Regeneration Movement. Joining him, Sandile Swana from the Wits School of Governance. Good to have both of you here on the program. Thanks so much for talking to us now.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
I think it's a nice conversation that we need to have as we begin the year and what is already proving to be a difficult year. There are lots of things that we're hearing, we're finding out about ourselves, that we're finding out about what happens behind closed doors and in front of cameras that are shocking a lot of us. Those words from our former President Nelson Mandela. Father, let me begin with you. You know, what did you take out of them? What do you understand it to mean, moral regeneration?
For me, Leanne, what is a real challenge to us South Africans is that somehow the abnormal has become normal. You know, there's something, this is a sign of the breakdown of the moral compass when people think that stealing, paying bribe, raping women and girls, killing, getting engaged in the looting and stealing of resources that belong to the poor, the poorest and so on. When people use violence as a way of expressing themselves, and we have got excessive sense of materialism. When people, you see wealth, political power as the norm. Now, for me, once we come to that level, then I can truly say there is a real, very serious threat to the moral compass of the country. Now, as Moral Regeneration Movement, we are saying that one of the weapons that we are using, is a tool really, is called the Charter of Positive Values, which was launched in 2008 by the then Mlambo Ngcuka, who was the deputy president, you know, at that time. There were over 3,000 people from all corners of South Africa and so on. Now, if you look at the values that are contained here, they accommodate all languages, all races, all ideologies, all political affiliations. So there's a way in which this forms a basis for social cohesion.
Yeah.
So for me, this is one simple tool that in fact people of all kinds, people of all faiths and so on, accept without any debate at all.
Yeah.
But what is most important is to go beyond just reading the little booklet. It's very rich, but it's to begin to discuss and to implement and to live out those values in our daily lives.
Okay, I'm going to press pause on that because I'm going to have a look at it and hold on to it and
sure.
sort of page through it as the interview goes on. But at the same time, Sandile, I want to talk to you, you know, when we talk about, again, I suppose I should ask you the same question. You know, where are we? Why are we losing our way? Why are we losing that moral compass? And I talk about as a nation, as an everyday occurrence in our lives on the streets of South Africa and in the boardrooms of the country as well as in our parliamentary rooms. I mean, it seems that everywhere we're losing that compass.
Yes. First of all, when you talk about the moral compass of a society, the moral compass of a society is in fact the leadership. When you talk about values, you talk about morality of culture and so on, it is the leaders who must manifest that. Now, I think for a long time in the past 100 years, there are people who have lived outside of the law. Somebody might have thought that he is clever when he's saying that certain people, such as black people, must be excluded from the law. And those people learned how to live outside of the law and so on. Some of them even went and formed organizations in the bush and so on and so forth. Today, those people are leading this country, being used to conducting illegal activities and so on. So that is part of the problem. Under apartheid, people had to buy oil in the black market because of sanctions. So big corporations were doing business in the black market during apartheid. So there is the so-called government of apartheid that looked so decent to some people on the one hand, and the ANC in exile and so on, all those parties were actually involved in continuing daily illegal activities. And those they could justify because they had a cause. Yeah. Well, that cause was to maintain white supremacy, or that cause was to overthrow white supremacy. So you have leaders now in the boardroom, you have leaders in parliament, in cabinet, who are used to doing things under the table and be proud of it because they were doing it for the people at the time, whoever those people might have been.
Now it's quite the opposite, because they're now doing it against the people. So what you're saying is that things haven't changed. The mindset hasn't changed. The constitution may have changed, the country may have changed, leadership, but the ongoings have not changed since the end of apartheid.
It has not changed. So when we are talking about, I was talking to a Nigerian friend of mine, and I say, how are things out there in Lagos? He says, hey man, anybody can build a bridge, anybody can build a beautiful building. But the mentality has not changed amongst the Nigerians. Yeah. So the mentality of doing wrong things and doing even the right things the wrong way is still there in Nigeria. And I think in South Africa, maybe we may have built a few beautiful things that you can see with your eyes, but the premises from which we move, the moral premises, the philosophical premises from which we move, we are philosophically bankrupt. Even when you listen to politicians and senior leaders, including business leaders who are talking, you can see that there is absolutely no philosophical basis, sound philosophical basis to the things we're doing in South Africa.
Yeah. Father, let me move on. I mean, I had a very, very quick look at some of the things that are stated in here. And no, it upsets me that this has to be written on paper, because this is something that we should be brought up with. This is something that your parents should teach you. It's something, respect others, concern for all, strive for justice, fairness, peace and equality, be honest, have integrity, have loyalty, have your family and community values. I mean, this is what should be brought into us anyway, but it's not. It isn't in there. We've lost this. Why? Is it because the family circle, our family morals have disappeared? Because it has to start somewhere. I mean, we can't blame everything on the government. We can't blame everything on business leaders. Because when I'm born, we all quote and say, we're born innocent, and then we are made guilty in this world. But what's going wrong? Is it the family values that are missing?
The time we lost Ubuntu, that's where the problem, I would say, intensified. Didn't start there, but intensified. Because Ubuntu emphasized the common good, peace, solidarity. It emphasized humanity. It emphasized that which built people materially, spiritually, and so on. It highlighted the importance of the spirit of sharing. Now, whether sharing ideas, sharing the material possessions, and so on. Now, the moment that, in a way, was threatened, I think we fell into the mess in which we are right now. Now, if you look back during the days of the struggle, it was very interesting that comrades could sacrifice their time, their money, and so on for the good of others. Yeah. I remember very well, we used to spend lots of, sometimes weeks and so on and days in Ginsberg, Steve Bigel's house. A 4-roomed house, But we used to go there, we used to sleep, we used to share, and there was a spirit of solidarity, also, camaraderie and so on and so on, and a spirit of self-sacrifice. Now, that's gone because the materialist culture has come into being, and people think in terms of how, not just a good house, but how big the house should, how expensive should be, how expensive my girlfriend should be, how expensive the car, how expensive the, and most of those things probably are as a result of either thieving, stealing other people's money and possessions, and that's why then that spirit of feeling for other people is really good, that spirit of solidarity. And for me, unless we can find a way to recapture that in a way that used to be, not necessarily used to be exactly in the past, because times changes, and obviously we've got to accommodate changes and so on. So that is really the big agenda that motivates the work of the Moral Regeneration movement, that let us do whatever we can, working with students, working with political organizations, and that's why, for example, we're even participating in this project called the Charter of Election Ethics.
Yeah.
And we are very much involved in encouraging people of a voting age to go all out. We say it's a moral obligation for them not only to register, but to go and vote ethically and correctly for the right kind of leadership, because they have the power, they have not only the legal power, but the moral power to make a change.
I think this is the most, powerful way that South Africans can speak. And if you're not happy with what you're seeing, this is where you have a voice, because you may not have a voice all the time, but your voice is that pen, and it is where you mark that X, and that hurts. That hurts the political parties when, that's the place it hurts them most, when they don't get those votes. But I want to ask, and you mentioned leadership, and that for me is at play here. We opened up the conversation quoting Nelson Mandela, who is revered as an unbelievable leader, as a man who had morals, he had ethics, he was anything but a saint, but the way he led, he was admired the world round. Now we look at South Africa, and wherever we turn, there seems to be a void of leadership. And I say seems to because there very well may be, but I'm not too sure. I'm seeing it on my television screens or listening to it or reading it. But the reality is could that be the problem? Is the lack of leadership that we so badly need right now?
We do, Leanne. There is no question about it. And we're not insulting anybody, by the way, when we say there's a lack of leadership. Jimmy Carter, in 1979 in the United States, talked about the crisis of confidence, where the Americans were totally hopeless, families were falling apart, and people had lost confidence in business leaders everywhere. It has happened before, this situation, and unfortunately Jimmy Carter analyzed it well, but he could not provide the solution. Mandela did come to South Africa, and he saw, coming out of prison, he saw the condition that we're in, and he called for the RDP of the soul. Unfortunately, in these 25 years of discussion, the younger leaders, including Cyril Ramaphosa, Thabo Mbeki, and others, Trevor Manuel, who were there, who listened to Mandela at the time, did not follow through with exhaustive implementation of the RDP of the soul. You can't build houses to build people. You need to build the actual people, how they think, their philosophies, how they approach things, their values. We have people today, I would say more than 60% of colored and African children do not have fathers in their homes. People make women pregnant all over the show. You have children by 5 different women, you're not providing support for anywhere. Because that idea that you need to be taking responsibility 24 hours a day for your children, for yourself, for your community, for your country is not there anymore. And the leaders who were there at the time taking us forward from 1994, the younger ones in particular, did not do this job, and this job must start now.
Yeah, and I think you've hit quite a big nail on the head there, is that, again, I go back to that same story. It's everything that is written in this book, everything that we talk about is that moral fiber that you should be learning from the day you're born, from both your mother and your father, but we keep on talking about the absence of the father. We also keep talking about the fact of the lack of dignity of so many South Africans. And when I talk about the dignity, I'm talking about those things that have been promised to South Africans. A good education, not a beautiful, I'm just saying a good education, a good healthcare system that treats you with respect and dignity, and a house over your head, sanitation, toilets, these kind of things that on a day-to-day basis South Africans do not have. There are only a few that have, but the majority don't have. Now, if you're living like that, how do you expect to treat your country with dignity when your country doesn't treat you with dignity? Father, help us find that. Where do we find the balance there?
Yes. Perhaps on the positive side, I know we're facing a huge problem. But on the positive side, I remember in 1997 at the Mafeking ANC conference in Mafeking, Mandela spoke for more than 2 hours on what he called the moral renewal, already in 1997, to show his commitment to ensuring that not only do we improve society, our lives materially, but that we also are guided by certain moral, ethical values, because if we neglect those, that's why then we have so much corruption, we have got materialism, we have got murders, we have got all kinds of things, because people haven't got the spiritual tools called ethical or moral values to be able to guide them. But let me also just say, for the record, that when I served on the ANC as an NEC member for 10 years, I do remember that the issue of ethics and morality, the ethos of moral regeneration was always on the agenda of the NEC. But I don't want to give reasons why, but after that it sort of disappeared.
So would you say that we have degenerated since 1997?
Well, there's a way in which one can also say that. But at the same time, having said so though, I always move from the premise that there are many good people out there, sometimes very simple people in the villages, in the townships, in the suburbs and so on, who do not always have a voice to be heard, but in their own way, little corners, they're doing some good work. And they're also concerned about the so many evils that are taking place, in the country. And that's why people are come back to the importance of leadership. Because look at what happened in Brazil recently.
Yes.
Now, you had people like Silva Dalula, who I met in South Korea before he got out of his position. He was almost our hero. Then he got involved in corruption. Then the people who took over from him also got involved in corruption. And it messed up the labor, the workers' movement and so on, to such an extent that people got so fed up about corruption, about unemployment, about all these sort of things, political leaders living the good life at the expense of the people, that they've now voted in almost a ho-ho. I'm sorry to that guy is bad news. Because people are saying, we don't care as long as he can fix up the corruption, he can fix up the unemployment, he can fix up the evils that we experience every day. Yeah. So it's therefore very dangerous for us to allow a situation of corruption, and because then you might also get
deeper and deeper, and you open up doors to holes. I haven't said that word in years. Father, I love it. We're heading into news time, but I want to wrap this up and find out, we've got all of these commissions, inquiries, all of this is happening. And we do have to commend South Africa for allowing us to speak about this, because there are many countries where we won't be able to speak about this, where this is taboo, and we would not try and get to the bottom of where we are. Yes, we're speaking about it. Yes, we know it's out there. Problem is nobody's being held accountable for it, and that for me is a very, very big problem. But is there a turnaround? Can we as a country turn around? What do we need to do to find ourselves on the right path again? Can I get 30 seconds from you?
Yeah, the short answer to that is that the DA, the UDM, and the EFF have got to intensify the litigation to force the ANC government to do the right thing. Without the people outside of the ANC forcing the ANC to do the right thing, we're not going to get anywhere.
Father, give us some hope.
Well, my view is that all the political parties have more or less similar manifestos and so on. So for me, the bottom line is not so much what is written on a piece of paper, it's actually to look at the leadership of the various political parties to ask, can you trust this guy? Is this a person of integrity? Is this the person who prioritizes the common good of all and so on? And for me, there is still hope, I must confess. And I even remember 3 weeks ago, the current president gave a lecture, Desmond Tutu lecture and so on, in which he agreed that the country is in a very, very, very serious situation. But he said the solution, in his own words, is social and moral regeneration. That's what he said. All right, that's a speech. But the challenge now is, how do you translate it? It's a powerful message. How do you translate that into something that is doable? Because people will only be changed, people will only be converted by practical action. And by practical action, of course, we're not only talking about political leaders. We are churches. What are your churches doing? What are we doing? I'm one of them, and so on. What are the political parties themselves doing? The institutions of higher learning. So what is business doing? So in a way, it should be a collective effort. But for that effort to see the light of day, come back to our point, we need enlightened, ethical leadership.
Indeed we do. And citizen leadership, I think, is where we're at right now. And we desperately need that within ourselves. Thank you. Thank you for talking to us. This is a conversation that I think I could sit and talk over a bottle of wine or whatever your favorite drink is until the early hours of the morning. But the chochos stood out for me. Let's not let the chochos take over. Father, it's always a pleasure having you in studio. Father Smangaliso Mkhatshwa of the Moral Regeneration Movement. He, of course, is the chair of that. And Sandile Swana from the Wits School of Governance. Thank you. Thanks very much for your views. All right, the time just gone 8 o'clock.